Welcome back to Feelings Matter, brought to you by Feelytics. I'm Michelle Stinson Ross.
And I'm Tina Schweiger.
And today we are wrapping up our broad discussion of emotional awareness with something that really geeks both me and Tina out. We get overly giddy about the geeky science stuff. And today we want to talk about assessing emotional awareness. How do you gauge that? How do you measure it? Is there some kind of test? I mean, to, you know, can we do it like we do an intelligence test? There's a lot to talk about here. And I want to start our discussion, Tina, in talking about the intelligence quotient and the emotional quotient. I feel like IQ and EQ are something that we need to level set on a little bit.
I think if you've been paying attention at all to leadership, the world of coaching, the world of like how to be a better leader, you may have read articles about the fact that um, EQ, having a higher emotional intelligence, is more highly correlated with success as a leader than IQ. Uh, have you heard that, Michelle?
Finally, it's starting to break through. I agree with you. It's interesting. I was just telling Tina off camera that I had a fantastic discussion with another lady who works a lot with company culture and HR. And one of the things we had discussed is this idea of soft skills, that we still call it soft skills. Those are the people skills, by the way, for those of you that don't understand what soft skills in the workplace, what that term means. Basically, that's talking about people skills, emotional skills. And it by calling it soft skills, it it doesn't really convey how very important that skill set is in the success not only of the individual but also for leaders that have direct reports, teams that they're responsible for. You add on that responsibility for other people, and the necessity of soft skills, EQ, um, goes through the roof. And yet we treat it as a nice to have rather than a necessity.
The soft skills are the hard skills, right? Because
Right.
they're it's hard to find like the book on how to have a high EQ.
Mhm.
Might be working on that book right now, though.
we, we hope so.
I've had this same question, in my studies, and the question of, how do you measure somebody's EQ? Are there assessments out there? We're familiar with things like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram. There's different personality assessments that'll tell you kind of what flavor or slice of a personality that you have or what personality traits.
Great.
But I was curious, like, what does measure EQ? If you have any that I've missed, please make a comment or reach out and let us know. The one I found was the MSCEIT, MSCEIT. It's really, I guess, considered the gold standard of a test or assessment that measures EQ. Being the curious person I am, I'm like, well, what are the questions? What's the data? How does it work? How is it scored? And then as I started diving into it, unfortunately, I found that they don't publish their data, which I think is not a good thing, I guess, for furthering science, but maybe it's a good thing for their proprietary information.
Well,
You can,
it's a good way to monetize it, but it doesn't really benefit culture and the rest of the world outside of their business model.
I know you can pay $2,500, you can get trained. Then that's how you can kind of review the data and review the assessment. I don't have, the spare $2,500 or a bunch of time sitting around to do that. But I was able to find one example question online, and it's a photograph of a cliff, like cliffs over an ocean. Maybe it's like on the coast of Wales or something like that. Those really tall vertical cliffs. And it says, how much is each feeling below expressed in the picture? And then it says happy, sad, fear, anger, and disgust. Um, I don't know about you, but when I look at a picture of cliffs and I'm asked how much happiness is expressed in it, I get a little confused. I don't know about
Yeah.
that. How about you, Michelle? How would you even answer that question?
Um, I'm not sure I would either. I mean, the truth is that most of the context that you're responding to is something that you've actually brought to the engagement. It has far less to do about the photo that you're looking at and more to do about what experiences and memories and all that stuff that you bring to your evaluation of the photo.
Yeah. I mean, we're both in marketing. I have a background in creative direction and design and have hired photographers, have created photo shoots, have created imagery. And to ask or to use that as a measure for emotional intelligence to me was a bit jarring because you bring your own background or backstory to an image and it makes
Right.
you reminds you of something. If you have a bad experience and you're afraid of heights and you're going to fall off a cliff, then you're going to maybe, see something completely different than if you're a cliff jumper or somebody who likes to do
Right.
high diving. So I don't understand how it would be a good measure. But so I kind of parked that one since I couldn't use it as a validation study for my assessment, which I created, which was let's measure emotional awareness. We've been talking a lot about emotional awareness and the research that I've done on emotional intelligence and mindfulness really points to emotional awareness as like the gateway angle of emotional intelligence that gets you into becoming better skilled at improving your own emotional intelligence because it is more of a skill than an innate emotional intelligence is not necessarily innate, it's actually a skill.
Mhm.
um, so I thought, well, I need to have something to like validate my assessment against, and I found one that was called the positive psychological capital assessment, and it measured 4 variables of psychological states. So this is like an attitude or a state of mind. You'll recognize them. It's optimism, hope, resilience, and competence.
Mhm.
And so they have an assessment that it's established. I could get the assessment. I could learn how to score it. I could use it in my as a comparison to emotional awareness, and I found some interesting things when I did that.
Well, and that's what I want to get into. So
Yeah.
I want to first of all talk a bit about the 5 dimensions of emotional awareness that you identified as something that's measurable, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start there. What are those 5 dimensions?
You and I started this conversation and you were like, oh, isn't it like trait and state? Like you have personality traits that influence your a level of emotional intelligence. Sure. You have state emotional awareness, meaning like you have emotions in the moment and you're aware of them. I went in a little bit of a different direction to tease this out, and I went through a mindfulness construct. So
Okay.
looking at a theory of mindfulness in a framework of meditation and mindfulness um, has different components of mindfulness, and I thought that's pretty interesting. It's from 2007. The authors are Hayes and Plum of this study of this theory. And I use this as the basis to kind of parallel with emotional awareness. So the mindfulness constructs that they outline are acceptance, cognitive diffusion, contact with the present moment, and self as context. I'll
Mhm.
give you a little bit of a background on what those mean. Acceptance is the active awareness and embrace of the events in your history without the attempting to change them or what's happening right now. You accept what's happening without trying to change it or judge it. So that's a dimension of mindfulness. Cognitive diffusion is a set of techniques that attempt to change the way a person relates to undesirable private experiences, such as thoughts.
Mhm.
So, how do you relate to your thoughts? How do you judge yourself for how you're thinking? You may have heard the word self talk that would kind of fall into the category of cognitive diffusion. Contact with the present moment is a person's ongoing non judgmental contact with the description of thoughts, feelings, and other private events as they occur. Kind of getting back to that concept of interoception that we were discussing last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then self as context, the ability to recognize and describe private experiences as a self that is separate from, not entangled with, one's private experiences. So I am not my thoughts. That's another construct of mindfulness and meditation.
Okay.
So to parallel that, I thought, well, what if we had state awareness rather than, the parallel then is, let me find my parallel chart. I can describe that exactly in my long paper. No. 25 pages. That's all. State awareness is the, okay, so acceptance. The parallel there was the awareness of emotions without judging the emotions or attempting to change them. So if you have acceptance as a mindfulness construct, then emotional awareness would be awareness of emotions without judging them. Mm-hmm. Cognitive diffusion was that way of self-talk. So the parallel with emotional awareness is that you have the regulation of emotions by changing the way a person regulates to the experience of their emotion.
Okay.
So rather than judging yourself on the thoughts you're having, are you judging yourself on the feelings you're having? I kind of do that. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Contact with the present moment, which means are you able to be persistently present with the present moment and be non-judging? Are you able to be persistently present with your emotional states as they change in the present moment without judging them? And then self as context is that ability to recognize that you and your thoughts are not the same. Do we have the ability to describe emotional experiences and know that your emotions are not you and that those are two different things? So there were some really great parallels, and that led me to the 5 different dimensions, which I list as state awareness, event awareness, complex sensing, physical awareness, and empathy.
Cool.
Unpack that for me.
Yeah. So state awareness, obviously that's kind of the core of emotional awareness, right? Where I can pause long enough to go, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling confused, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling elevated. I'm feeling excited. Today is one of those days where I got up and I'm excited about the things coming my way today. And so just that level, that would be that state awareness, right?
Exactly. Like, are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with observing and confronting your own changing emotional states?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are.
And that's kind of where the skill comes in. I mean, there's that level of, okay, that's what I feel like, but there's also that level of skill where I can be comfortable in just sitting with both the joy and the sadness or the anger or the frustration and going, okay, I recognize that I'm frustrated. But rather than acting just on that frustration, adding a little bit of level of skill there and ask and getting curious. That get curious bit of it where it's like, okay, why am I frustrated? Is it just because I'm tired?
Could be, yeah. Or rather just being like, I'm always frustrated. I hate it that I'm always so frustrated. And that's how your emotions can pile on each other, where you have a negative one and then you have a negative feeling about your negative feeling and then just spiral down.
Yep. So related to that, at least the way I see it, is event awareness is, okay, what might be triggering that emotion? Mm-hmm. What's the external trigger? Not my internal trigger, but what are the external triggers? So going back to saying that I woke up excited about my day. Yeah. Well, as I started to get awake and think about what's coming today, I knew I had this conversation. I knew I had another conversation with a colleague based in the UK. So I was excited about those. Those are definitely events. I'm going to get I live in a little 1-bedroom apartment, y'all, and I'm going to get an external storage closet today. Guys, I'm excited.
That's right. You're aware of the emotion excitement based on the event that is taking place today. And that's exactly what the event awareness is. We encounter events, small events, big events, weddings, funerals, and a new storage unit. All of those are events.
Yep. I actually, before we talk about blend, I want to jump into physical awareness because that's a lot of what we were talking about last week with, okay, I'm excited. So what does that feel like in my body right now? That, for me, it definitely affects posture. Like when I'm energized, when I'm excited, I'm likely to sit up straighter, put my shoulders back. I'm not like hunched over, because when I'm tired or depleted or any of that, I close in on myself, because I go into protection mode. Especially anxiety causes me to draw up. So when I'm not anxious, when I'm excited and I feel elevated and I feel energized, you could tell that from me, from my posture. And I know that because all of a sudden my neck issues that I have, because I work at a computer a lot. So neck and shoulders tend to be an issue for me. And I can tell when I'm in a good mood that I don't have nearly as many of those issues, because I'm sitting up. I'm doing all of, my posture's in a better state. So
Yeah,
that
no
for
kidding.
me
I mean,
is being aware that, oh, I'm elevated and also my body is now elevated.
you mentioned last time that when you were feeling depressed, like your physical body would change, your face would become less expressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an awareness, a level of awareness of how emotions impact your body physically. And that's just a dimension of emotional awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Complex sensing is like what multiple emotions may I be feeling at once. You might have multiple feelings about this storage unit, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some excitement, but there's also like, oh, I got some work to do.
A little dread, like, oh my God, I would have dread of like all the moving and the organizing of all the
Um,
stuff.
Maybe a little bit. I think once I actually see what size the storage unit is, and what I've got to work with, then maybe a little bit of that might kick in, just as I strategize how I want to go about dealing with that. I mean, the thought that I might want to order um, like a very basic shelving unit to put in has already kind of popped in my head, but I'm like, no, 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 let's not get too far ahead of ourselves in this process. Let's actually see what the storage closet looks like first.
No kidding. That's right. That's exactly it. And our last one is empathy.
Mm-hmm. And being aware of one another. So empathy is one of those things that's kind of interesting, especially in this weird world that we currently live in, where Tina's in Austin and I'm in St. Paul, and the only way that we see one another is through this little camera right here. And does technology in this case impact my ability to be empathetic? Are both of us like turning ourselves on? Are we, because the camera's on, has our behavior changed enough that I can't really be entirely certain that I know what's going on with Tina, because all of a sudden we're in performance mode because the camera's on. So those things can impact our workplace empathy. I know I engage with Tina very differently when we're both in the same room.
Definitely. So this assessment then has about 4 questions for each of those different 5 dimensions. So roughly 20 questions, or no, yeah, about 20 questions. When I did this study, I had 126 people take this assessment to kind of identify their level of optimism, hope, resilience, and efficacy assessment. And then I compared it to the assessment that I wrote, which was how aware of you are of state emotions, of event based emotions, blend emotions, physical emotions, and emotions in others. Do you want to know what I found?
I do want to know what you found, but before we go to that, can you give us some examples of what those types of questions
Yeah.
were, how the respondents were expected to answer them, just so that people can get a sense of what the assessment was actually like?
Yeah. So, empathy, for example, uh, a simple question. And I believe that this was the first draft of the questions, and I'd like to revise them. But in general, I do not notice how others around me are feeling. And the answer would be to the degree to which you agree or disagree with that statement. Or a question of, I typically only notice the emotions of others at major events like weddings, funerals, the loss of a job, or news of a pregnancy. And then the third question, I guess I had three in each because I don't want to over question people.
Mm-hmm.
If a person nearby is visibly upset and crying, it makes me feel upset too. Like, do you feel the emotions? So that was, how much do you agree with the statement or don't agree with it?
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just ask for a second, because the way you pose the questions to me is interesting, that you state the it's not even actually a question. It's a statement that is posed from the first person, and then you ask the respondent, how much do you agree or disagree with that statement? Can can you give us a little insight into why it's posed that way?
It's a common way of assessing in like a personality test. If you take like a big five test, it will be how much do you agree with a certain statement, and that would helps the scoring.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you agree quite a bit with a statement that I'm generally, if a person nearby is visibly upset and crying, it makes me feel upset too. That either is very representative of you or not very representative of you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way to kind of get, I think it's a quicker reaction. It's a little bit more of a feeling reaction than a thinking reaction to go, do I identify with that statement or not? It's pretty clear. If somebody nearby me is visibly upset and crying, I'm certainly that is upsetting to me too. And then that's what triggers me to go and ask that person, are you okay? Do you need help? Like that's what kind of drives that empathy. So if you read that statement and you don't relate to it at all, your maybe level of empathy isn't naturally quite as high. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad. It just means that as a work item to improve your own emotional intelligence, you might focus, if you score a little lower there, you might focus on uh, actively paying attention to the emotions of others around you as a practice, as a mindfulness practice. And that's where I think mindfulness and emotional awareness and intelligence are so commingled
Yeah.
because being able to observe another person who's crying and not judge them is a very high level of skill to develop emotional intelligence wise.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, what were the results from the first time you ran this evaluation? And now
So
I'm thinking we need to do this again sometime.
there was a pattern for sure. And the pattern that I found was that the questions that were around the sensing of multiple emotions at once were the outcome. Like if people scored highly on that, they were also more likely to score highly on the other assessment in optimism, first and foremost. Secondly, resiliency. Third, efficacy. And fourth, hope. Um, the state awareness, meaning like I am aware of my emotions in the moment and what's going on, was negatively correlated with the results. So it was a very, I would say, somewhat inconclusive validation study, and because it also wasn't a good validation. I would say that the big aha out of it for me was the reading of the research that says that if you are an optimistic person, that it's more likely that you also have high emotional intelligence. And that was the highest correlation. It was a 0.31 on a Cronbach's alpha, if you're curious on the statistics, which isn't super high, but it's not zero. It's not nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of validated a little bit that if you are scoring high in optimism, you also are probably one who is able to sense multiple emotions at once, which is really kind of the highest skill level item in the assessment. So that's what I found,
That's really
and
cool.
makes me want to rewrite it, test it
Well,
again.
and that's I'm just gonna throw you a total curveball here, because neither one of us discussed how we wanted to take this conversation. But now that we're talking about it, I want to ask you, yes, I realize you probably want to rewrite it, refine it, that sort of stuff. But do you see this as something that could be offered for people to just like take a moment, assess where they are in their emotional intelligence journey, and get some advice on, what skills to work on, where should we put our time and attention? Is this something that could be used in that way moving forward?
I think at a basic level, yes, because you could get a comparison at least between the categories, and it would give you a ranking of like, okay, here's my strongest area of emotional awareness, here's my weakest area.
Mm-hmm.
And that can certainly drive some self-improvement efforts. I think the other thing that would be awesome, if anyone out there has a company and they do normally do an emotional intelligence assessment with their employees, I would love the opportunity to provide this assessment alongside of that, because I think that's what this really needs in order to be a tool that could be useful and marketable.
Mm-hmm.
Would be a little bit more validation against a true emotional intelligence assessment, and then just giving the assessment more and more often so that we have more data points to compare the scores to when the scores come in.
Sure. I would really like to personally maybe work through that. It's interesting. You and I have also been having conversations with people out in the world outside of our little Feelalytics bubble that say that assessments are helpful. That, I mean, we had a conversation yesterday that brought up an assessment would really be helpful and useful in this case. So this may be
Yeah.
something that we want to contribute again to science, like we did with our validation study that we did last year. Maybe this is a good opportunity to contribute to science again.
Yeah, definitely. I thought about that. I was like, I wonder if I should run this another time and then look at run it by our science advisor and see what they think.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like to have those Dr. Linda Kay at Edge Hill University, who, shout out to her. Thank you for being our fantastic science advisor, and working with us on our study of emoji. But I wanted to run this by her as well. So it's coming to your inbox soon. Dr. Linda, if you're listening.
I think that puts us in really good stead. I obviously we're going to be looking at ways to show this data off, put it in a viewable, readable type format at some
Yeah,
point.
I'm almost done with that. In fact, if anybody wants it, sign up or reach out. Maybe we can put a little form fill on our podcast, our show notes page, because I will have a like a white paper, if you will, that goes over the results of this study available very soon.
Fantastic. Tina Schweiger, thank you so much for engaging in 3 weeks of conversation around emotional awareness.
I love it. Thank you for being a fantastic co-host, a wonderful business partner, a beautiful human being, and that you're excited today is good.
I needed to get there at some point.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes we have our ups and our downs for sure, myself included.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please feel free to leave comments, questions in whatever channel you happen to be watching this in, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.